they're a great opportunity to hear from the people we read about every day. I would also like to recognize the co-sponsors of this event, UCLA Government and Community Relations, and the media sponsor of this event, the Government Center Gazette and Van Nuys News Press. Now, I would like to introduce our other presenting sponsor from NBC Universal, Stephen Neeson.
I'll take the other corner here from Juliet. My name is Steve Nissen, and as Juliet said, I'm with NBC Universal. It is of particular importance to us that one of these four candidates will become the next assembly member from the 46th district, because NBC Universal sits in that newly redrawn district. Now, in a time of high unemployment and economic uncertainty and great public embrace of public officials, one would wonder why anyone in their right mind would actually want to run for such a position. And to help us answer that and other pressing questions of the day, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this debate, Jacqueline Giovis, who is the editor of the San Fernando Valley Business Journal. Jacqueline.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Juliet. I'd like to thank the candidates for coming out today. Really looking forward to the discussion we're going to have. A little bit about the district. The 46th Assembly District includes the San Fernando Valley communities of North Hills, Panorama City, Lake Balboa, Van Nuys, Valley Glen, Sherman Oaks, Valley Village, Studio City, Toluca Lake, and Universal City. So we're joined here by our candidates, Adrin Nazarian, Andrew Lachman, Ryan Johnson, and Laurette Healey. Just wanted to give you guys a little update here on what the ground rules are. So we'll give each candidate 2 minutes to make some opening statements, and then we will turn it over to questions. I'll ask some questions. I ask that you candidates limit your responses to 1 minute each, just for the sake of time. And we'll have Doug back there helping you all to keep time. And each candidate then will have the opportunity, we'll open up for questions to the audience, and then each candidate will have an opportunity to make some closing statements. All right? So without further ado, let's get it started. Adrin, if you want to start off.
Of course, thank you. First and foremost, thank you everyone for taking time away this morning to be joining us. I want to thank VICA also for putting this event together, as well as for helping to create this district and through their work and efforts in the Citizens Redistricting Commission meetings taking place last summer. I have a great connection to this district. I have lived or worked in this district for the period of the last at least 16 years or so, ever since graduating from the wonderful university just across town in UCLA. There's more to come. I worked at the federal level for Congressman Sherman, worked for Councilman Tom LaBonge, worked for Gray Davis at the Trade and Commerce Agency. For the last 6 years, I've been Chief of Staff to then Assembly Member Paul Krikorian, then Assistant Majority Leader, now Council Member Paul Krikorian. And I have my parents, I grew up in the West Valley where my parents still live, and was fortunate enough to be able to attend all three of California's fine institutions, Pierce College, Cal State Northridge, and then ultimately graduating from UCLA. And I was able to do this at a time when students were able to pay for themselves, work enough, even part-time, and to be able to pay for their way through tuition or book expenses or just general college expenses. So one thing that I care to do very deeply about is to make sure that that opportunity is given to other students and future generations, as well as making sure that tax credits are in place for entertainment industry, green tech jobs are the wave of the future, and we have to invest in that and fully fund K through 12 education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First of all, again, I'd like to thank VICA and my friend Stuart Waldman for putting together this wonderful event. I've been here at many meetings in this room with the Entertainment Committee when I worked with it. And I'd like to welcome my fellow candidates as well. And especially with UCLA, I want to let you know, although I didn't go to UCLA, I did the next best thing I could do. I married someone who went to UCLA. But I do have family sort of in the business, for those of you who understand donuts in Westwood. That's my cousin. So for those of you I've not yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Adrin Lachman, and I'm running for the State Assembly in the 46th Assembly District. The district has already been described. The way I always describe it is only in Sacramento do you combine 40, 42, and 43 and end up with 46. It's a special Sacramento math we see at work. Now, we all know that Sacramento is mired in a certain amount of dysfunction and discord right now. I feel with my comprehensive set of experiences, I'm uniquely situated to help motivate change in Sacramento. I can't say I'm going to do it all by myself, but I will tell you, with my 10 years of experience in law, technology, and entertainment, with working for companies like Paramount Pictures and OSI Consulting out here in the Valley, with my experience working in state government, working for State Senator Curran Price as consultant to the Joint Committee on the Arts, where we work to extend the film credits, where we work to increase funding for arts education, and as an educator for Woodbury University, where I teach business law and business policy. Now, why would I be running for assembly at a time like this? And it's not just because I'm Jewish and I love suffering. It's because there are voices that aren't being heard in Sacramento, and we can't keep coming back with the same solutions and the same people. There are voices not being heard, and some of them are here in this room, like the business owner who wants to see a common sense approach to government, the employer who's concerned that we don't have people with 21st century work skills coming out of our colleges because of budget cuts. And at the end of this forum, I hope that I will earn your support as well. And I look forward to the chance to make my case. And I hope that you'll agree that I'm the one best situated to move California forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to see many of you here today. My name is Brian Johnson. I want to also begin by thanking VICA and Stuart for pulling together what is the first, actually, joint meeting of the candidates for the 46th Assembly District. You know, I grew up in a home where my father would go to West Point and was an Army officer, and my mom, who was a public school teacher. And I was privileged to go to great public schools across this country. And so when I had the great chance to go and spend 4 years at Princeton University in the late 90s, and I was graduating during the first big internet boom, I wanted to actually serve my country the way that my parents had. And I actually decided to go to the Deep South to be a first grade teacher, where I signed on to teach in Baton Rouge, Louisiana at a 100% low income, 100% African American school. And I tell you this because it was here at this school, getting to know my students of Hazel and Denzel, Trevante and Ladacia, that I saw firsthand and personally how opportunity in our country can too often be doled out on the way of class and race and country of origin. And I thought to myself, not only is that immoral, but that is not who we say we are, and that is not the best of who we are in this country. I believe in the American dream, and I believe in the California dream, and I decided then that I would fight to make sure that every family, every worker, and every child would have a fair shot at the American dream. And I came to California because there's no place that represents the American dream better than California. I was privileged to go to law school at Stanford, I was privileged to go to business school at Stanford, and again, I walked away from the corporate jobs to actually stay focused in public education. I worked at Teach for America as the executive director here in LA, and recruited over 700 of our top college graduates to teach throughout Los Angeles. And I am running because I believe, as I've been running a public school for the past 2 years, that we need someone who's not only willing to fight for our values and fight for our future, to fight for good jobs and a good budget, but also someone who's had the experience of balancing a budget during tough times, and who's fought to create jobs and grow good schools, even during tough budget times. Thank you.
Laurette.
Thank you everyone, and Stuart, thank you so much for putting this together and having us from the Valley come together and really talk about what's going on for all of us as we move forward into this 21st century. What I will tell you is that there's really nothing more important right now than to look at the playing field that we're in and to decide how we're going to move the ball down the court, if you will, to the new 21st century workforce, and how our economy and how your business is shaped as a result of what we're dealing with today. My background is that I'm from the private sector. I worked my way up. I started out in this area as a script supervisor and became a member of the Directors Guild of America, but I had other plans. I wrote a business plan which ultimately became what's known today as Seen on TV, and met with the founder of Home Shopping Network and became a partner there, where I worked for about 5 years. For those guys who like statistics, we had a 67% return on the initial capital investment within a year. But my passion was really about public service. My father was a state assembly member in New York for 25 years. I was 3 when he entered the public arena, and he taught me something. He taught me that there is nothing greater than the work that is worth doing, and the value that you bring to others when you accomplish the goal that actually achieves benefit for everyone around you. And that's something that for me is sacrosanct. It's why I'm here again. I had run in 2008, and I think some of you know that I did not succeed in that mission. But I looked around this community, the community that I have lived in for 25 years, and I saw that people needed jobs, they needed training. And so I went out and I coordinated the largest green jobs workforce training program in the nation at Long Beach City College and then at Pierce College, where I served as assistant director. And we had a 50% job placement. That is a historic high. What it tells me is that people want to work. What it tells me is that we have a brand new opportunity. Despite what we see in our economy right now, we are at the beginning of the 21st century, and I think we have an opportunity that we can maximize upon, and I'm looking forward to talking about that today. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna start off with an easy question, but the tough part's gonna be keeping your answers to 1 minute. So, what is the first bill that you plan to introduce if you're elected? Adrin?
Thank you. Great question to ask at the first debate. It would be, actually I know it very well, it would be extending the tax credits to the entertainment industry that I had the pleasure of working for, which we passed as Chief of Staff. I was working for then Assemblymember Paul Gregorian. We were able to pass a historic bill, first time in California's history, after decades of bleeding this industry away, and Northern California representatives not wanting to budge. This fight was lost within the Democratic Party. It wasn't even part lost within the entire state legislature, by the way. Let me just tell you that. So we finally were able to be successful in winning, and so I would look to extending the currently it's in its 4th year, starting its 4th year. It was 1 year further was passed by Assemblymember Fuentes. So I look to passing a 5-year bill and the return, since statistics were mentioned. First 5-year bill
I'm
is
sorry,
100
Adrin,
million.
I gotta cut you off. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Sure.
I got the tough job here. Not really. Andrew, go ahead.
Norm, they originally were gonna put electric shock plates underneath us. I wanna go a step further. As a consultant of the Joint Committee on the Arts, I think that the tax credits are a good start. We need a creative sector plan for California, and that's what I would introduce as my first bill. States like Florida and Texas and Michigan have formalized the role of arts education as a result in their K-12 program as a result of their strategic plan. They've worked with higher education to identify 21st century work skills such as video game production, which a third of all the video game companies have offices in LA, and have identified specific policies to help not only the film industry, but the toy industry, the fashion industry. We do more in fashion than New York does. And also, I put together an animation task force to come up with ideas for the animation industry. It was a nice first step, but frankly, in order to compete in this environment and with the way that entertainment is going, we need to have a broader view, and that's why a strategic plan for the creative sector is so important. Thank you.
Brian.
Great, thank you. Our budget is broken, and that fact actually inhibits our ability to invest in our infrastructure, protect our environment, create a streamlined regulation process for businesses, and make sure that we have a global public education system. So my first bill would be to actually increase flexibility for cities, schools, agencies, and counties, so that they have more opportunity to spend money on the people and programs that we know here in the Valley matter most in providing services to our community, and not be mired by regulations from Sacramento telling us how we need to actually be providing services here in our community. Thank you.
Actually, I'm sorry, Brian, I'll give you an extra minute, because I think your question was very broad, and the other candidates had more focused answers, so if you could be a little bit more specific for us.
Sure. So I'll give you an example in K-12 education, for example. So this example can apply to any other sector. In K-12 education, you have 87 different categorical funding programs. And that means that you could run the risk of being awash with art supplies and have to fire your art teacher. Same thing can happen in public safety, same thing can happen in many different contexts. And so we need to actually make sure that we continue to extend this idea that there are tiered investments in different categorical funding programs. Tier 1 would be programs that we want to maintain at the current levels. Tier 2 would be programs that we want to make sure we're still hitting the outcomes but want to give more flexibility. And Tier 3 would be programs that allow full flexibility on the ground. And then particularly in times when revenues dip, say below 5% on a running 3-year average, we actually allow more flexibility for those programs.
Thank you, that helps provide some clarity. And Laurette?
I would really focus on manufacturing, and particularly domestic manufacturing. There's a direct correlation between the level of exports that we have and job loss. California and Florida are particularly doing very bad in job creation, and the relationship is, as we lose our manufacturing base, which, by the way, those of us who've lived here for a long time remember a period where we did have a very strong, vibrant manufacturing base. So I'd like to work on specific incentives for domestic manufacturing, within that also workforce training, so that as we move forward in our technology-driven or knowledge-driven manufacturing, we have a skilled workforce that can actually accommodate the manufacturing we're doing. Case in point, the fashion industry downtown Los Angeles currently has 3,600 jobs available today. And the folks that could actually fill those jobs don't know how to operate the equipment. So really, we could reduce the job loss that we have experienced in this state by 1 full percentage point if we were to invest in technology and knowledge-driven training, and to also put incentives in for manufacturing to occur here in Los Angeles. So I would start with that.
Great. Big question. Budget. The state budget is obviously, it's broken, and from all we've heard, it doesn't look like it's going to get fixed anytime soon. And so I ask you all, what would you do to fix the state's budget deficit?
In a minute.
It's an easy one.
This is
This is an easy question to get stumped on. The reality is, it hasn't been working for quite some time now. We've been always late, year after year, for the past at least a decade. The revenues are continually going down. We're constantly hindering ourselves by passing more measures at the ballot box, restricting the legislature to do its work by restricting funding for specific areas. It's going to require quite a few things to get this fixed. It's both a long-term and a short-term fix. It's not something that's going to happen right away. Long-term, we need to allow our legislators to actually do the work, or when we're passing measures, to figure out where the revenue source is going to be coming from. And our elected officials need to be a little more responsible in forcing that to take place as well. The 2/3 majority has to change when it comes to revenue generation. I'm looking forward to the open primary, allowing for more moderate voices to come in to see what we can do to be able to pass a balanced budget and put in the revenue necessary to be able to implement the programs. Thank you.
After this, I'm going to solve Millie's piece too. I would say this, Adrin is right, there's two sets of problems. One is in the short term. In the short term, Everyone's trying to push for a variety of changes to our budget system, to increase accountability, to look at performance-based budgeting, to talk about how we can make sure the money we are spending is being spent properly. But we also need to give more flexibility to our localities to allow them to raise revenue, because there's more accountability on the local level. People trust their local government more than they trust their state government, and with the way we've been going, no wonder. We also do need to change the 2/3 requirement. We need to loosen the do initiative reform. And frankly, on our budget as a whole, we do embrace some of the ideas from California forward in terms of going to a 2-year budget, making sure that we can really have honest accounting in our system as well. As someone who's worked in both the public sector and the private sector, I think we can combine those disciplines to make a difference. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is going to be, this incremental change will get us a long way, and will also get us to the point where the state stops stealing the localities' money as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yes, this is what I live and breathe. I run an $8 million a year public agency, and even again in 20% per pupil budget cuts, we've been able to create jobs, balance budget every year, and have more students. And I think there are 3 things that we can do and need to do right off the bat. One I've already mentioned: provide more flexibility for our cities, agencies, schools, and counties to protect the people and programs that matter most. 2 is we need to end the smoke and mirror budgeting process by entering into a 2 or 3-year budgeting process, so that we don't actually look like we're passing a balanced budget when we're actually deferring payments to schools and counties, or by selling buildings. And number 3, we actually need to make sure that our tax base reflects a 21st century California economy, not a 20th century economy. That's going to mean broadening the tax base, but doing so in a way that lowers the tax rate. For example, on internet sales, making sure that we are not subsidizing out-of-state companies like Amazon at the detriment of our local bricks and mortar stores here in the Valley. Thank you.
Well, there's a few things that I would like to start with. I'd like to reinstate the vehicle license fee, which was a $5 billion shortfall that we've been experiencing since it's been removed from our economy. There's the top performing states are Texas, North Dakota, Florida, Alaska, in terms of their gross revenues. They have an oil extraction fee, which we do not have. It's long overdue in the state of California. That's another $5 to $10 billion that we can look towards, depending on how we move forward with that. When I was Deputy State Controller, the area that I focused on was Medi-Cal reform. Sounds like a really fun thing to do, but it was. Frankly, we have about a 20% overspending per year on Medi-Cal expenditures, simply because we have an archaic system. Our system was introduced in the late 80s and early 90s, which does not have any protocol oversight. What does that mean? That means we spend $3 to $4 billion a year on Medi-Cal, where sometimes these doctors don't even exist. If you add all of that up, it's a revenue gain of about $10 billion, and it's a conservation of about $5 billion a year. I think we can put the budget in line. I'm in favor of a 1-year budget. Let's keep ourselves on our toes and stop overproducing bills that don't get us anywhere.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. And I'm going to kind of change up the lineup here so everybody has time to think about their question. Yeah, you're first. And just kind of hearing the discussion, I mean, I think, one of the questions follow-up questions that I have is, do we need to keep cutting, and how much more do we cut? And where, if we decide to invest, what are the industries that are most important to invest in? So.
Well, cutting is really interesting, because we're not really cutting, we're shifting. There's $1 billion in the proposed cut, quote unquote, by Governor Brown that shifts the prison, it's prison reform, but basically the county's now starting to take prisoners that are the overflow from the state. We are now responsible for that. So I don't consider that a cut, I consider that a shift. So, there's a very big, either we we shift, or we create money. We really aren't cutting a whole lot.
Do we need to cut more?
No, we don't need to cut more. What we need to do is find new investments in California. And an idea that I have is an investment vehicle that would allow American corporations that, if I have 10 seconds, I'm just not gonna get there. Let me finish this sentence. It's a new concept that would be a joint committee between the state assembly and Congress, where we find a vehicle whereby we can have foreign companies that have received revenues from overseas, say GM, for example. That's $3 trillion that we have that we can pour back into the United States and specifically California for infrastructure build-outs. It's a tax-exempt vehicle. It's one of the reasons why our American corporations do not bring the money back into this country. And we build out other countries and other infrastructure. So I think if we can start looking at a way to abate that tax for specific investments in the United States, we would be looking at a serious reinvestment in this country, and it is desperately needed.
Thank you. Yeah, you can touch back on that in your closing statements, because it sounds like that was definitely it's an interesting proposal. Brian,
Yes.
You're up.
We can't continue to go year after year of just a budget cuts only solution. We have to have a combination of cuts and revenue increases going forward. But again, one of the challenges we face is our tax base is reflective of a 20th century economy. And so what I see our legislators doing in Sacramento is say we have, among the highest sales tax rates in the country, born in part because it is shouldering a disproportionate burden of the revenue base. And then we apply that in a single shot deal to new sectors and new industries without having a portfolio approach and a collaborative approach with our businesses to say, listen, we do need to actually transition our tax base to a more reflective 21st century tax base. But what would that look like? What would be tenable to business community? Over what period of time? And if we did that, we could do so in a way which not only broadens the base, but lowers the tax rate. And early studies have suggested not only would that increase revenue, so we can invest in the services that we need here in California, but it would increase the stability of revenues, so we end this whiplash that we face in our communities. Thank you.
What you're talking about is the Think Long plan, which has already been out there, and certainly the discussion about doing a use tax. I think all ideas have to be on the table because we can't keep cutting. We're actually stopped investing. We've stopped investing in our universities, we've stopped investing in our infrastructure, and frankly, even with our tax incentive programs, some of which create jobs, we haven't really come up with a litmus test to see what works and doesn't. Well, the film credits work. For every dollar we put out, we get $1.14 back. It's really hard to say that we should be engaging in corporate welfare when we're cutting adult daycare, community colleges, etc. But what we can do is prioritize things which get us return back on our investment. When we invest in our colleges, we can not only get great research, which gets more jobs, it also creates a 21st century workforce. When we invest in our infrastructure, it brings business to California because we have throughput. People want to bring goods, manufacture goods, and bring them through our system. So that's how I think we can prioritize what we do. The budget's not an easy thing to answer in terms of where do we cut. We can't just keep cutting anymore. We need to look at what the mission of government is and start living up to that promise instead of avoiding it. So.
Adrin.
Just to put things in perspective, we're doing the same, or we're expecting to do the same thing today that we did 10 years ago with a population growth, but yet $20 billion less. If anyone here thinks this is sustainable, then I'd be interested to know how you get to your conclusions. But this doesn't work. And further cuts are not the solution. We've cut as much as possible. I think we're cutting to the point to our detriment of our future. We keep on talking about investing in job creation. The best job creator is our universities. People come from all over the world to attend UCLA, Stanford, many of our, well, Stanford's private, but many of our fine public institutions. We need to be continually investing back in them. And we need to be able to home grow our students who are going to be attending these universities as well. We need to invest in K through 12. So that said, I'm just going to make a quick comment about the specific question. We've already restructured, but we need to find efficiencies. We need to be able to look in the industries that are going to become more efficient. Renewable energy is one great place where we can create manufacturing jobs to stay right here because we've lost that sector a long time ago. And creating work business clusters along major freeways and corridors, which are currently depressed right now. Happy to talk about that later on.
Excellent. All All right, switching gears here a little bit. The state support for higher education keeps dropping. Tuition, debt burden for students keeps going up, up, up. Just last year, the University of California system received a 21% drop in state support, and it was forced to respond with a 10% increase in tuition fees. If so, what do you propose to do about it, both in the short and long term? Laurette.
Well, this is where the vehicle license fee really plays a very important role, because it is extracted. Those vehicle license fees are paid on a local level. So the idea would be to allow those vehicle license fees to be directly funneled to the communities that in which they serve, if you will. So with that, it goes to our K through 12 and our adult occupational and community college programs, because it's a local type of approach. It gives more flexibility to the educators and to the institutions that are educating in the community. That frees up money, in my opinion, for state colleges and state universities, so we can actually provide an additional form of help, because Prop 98 doesn't cover those funds. And so these guys are really starving, while we're talking a lot about K through 12. A 4-year program, higher education is actually where we get to a 21st century workforce. So to me, the vehicle license fee is a local issue. It goes to our local education, and we free up state funds for universities and state colleges.
We cannot fulfill the California dream without a world-class higher education system. I mean, my grandfather was a high school dropout. 2 generations later, I was able to get my law degree and business degree because of higher ed. There's no solution here without revenue increases. In part because in our budget we have 3 legal requirements that we need to fund, which I absolutely support. The Prop 98 requirements to K-12 schools, debt service obligations, and pension obligations. So when revenues dip, it squeezes everything else, social services in particular, as well as higher education. So there is actually no way that we can solve the higher education problem without revenue increases. So in part, I come back to the 2 critical things I think we need to do. 1, we need a tax base that's more reflective of the 21st century economy. And number 2, I would like to work within our higher education system to find out where are ways that we could increase their flexibility in spending so that they can move on the ground, campus by campus, money into the programs that they need to protect the most.
Well, it is in part a revenue problem. I went back and looked at how Texas has managed to keep its public education system as strong as it is. Now, unfortunately, California didn't give a whole bunch of land in West Texas, which just happened to be a lot of oil on top of it, to fund their university system. So we have to find other ways to do it. Frankly, I think the more we enable localities to raise their own revenue, we can start to look at how we spend our money, and instead of having the state stealing these Prop 13 money as we've done for years, we can take some of that money back because the localities now have their own reliable revenue sources. Take that money, put it into education, put it into paying off the debt, put it into, frankly, even lowering and adjusting our tax rates to reflect the reality of where we are. If you're single and make $40,000 in this state, you're in the top tax bracket. Makes no sense whatsoever. So we really do need to prioritize. Secondly, we do need to go back, continue examining the master plan, and find out and reassess basically how we lay out our education system. We've made little tweaks to it over the years. We need to update that as well. But the bottom line, frankly, is that our university system is our front line of investment. It's what's made a difference in Texas and what makes the difference here. And we frankly need to start reinvesting in it in ways that we've forgotten to in the past, recently.
We need to, one thing I thought you were going to mention also was we need to look at the split tax roll.
Thank you. Yes.
I don't understand why. It's very important to protect our seniors and those who have invested in their homes and have been there for a very long time, to give them the safety of mind that nothing's going to happen to their private residential component of this. But when you have Anheuser-Busch sitting on 3 million square feet within the northern portion of 46th district, paying only $18,000 annually for property tax, I think there's folks in this room probably who pay that much for their home. That just does not make sense, and that is not the way that we need to be generating revenue to be supporting our institutions. So that's one. Second, it just seems like we've shifted our focus. Seems like we actually like getting foreign students here to pay the maximum tuition. We need to be investing in our institutions. Right now, it's only at about 12% of the budget. And with the budget dropping 20%, that tells you how much the funding in CSU and UC education has dropped as well. We need to increase the funding and maintain it so that we're investing in our future workforce.
Thank you. Switch gears a little bit here. Great answers. Name one group that you think has too much power in California government. And I'm going to start with you, Brian.
I'm sorry, the hot seat. You know, I think with this one, in the post-term limit world, quite honestly, I'm going to have to say it's the general bureaucracy. When we send legislators up to Sacramento to actually serve a maximum of a 6-year term in the Assembly or 8 years in the Senate, to pass and think on $100 to $200 billion a year budget. What this means is our expertise, the knowledge base, what it actually takes to move this forward effectively in complex policy issues resides so much in the bureaucracy. And that's not to bemoan the hard work of many of the people who are working in those institutions in Sacramento. They're desperately needed. But I believe we do need reform to term limits to make sure that we have legislators who bring the experience from the field and from the community, but have the time there to learn about the complexities of what it takes to do that job.
All right, I'm going to go to you, Andrew. Try to be specific about one group, one particular group that has too much power.
Too much power.
Is there any such thing, right?
I agree that term limits have completely evacuated the expertise out of Sacramento, and as a result, it has put a reliance on people who used to work in the legislature. I have many friends who were in the lobbying industry. I'm not going to say that every single lobbyist is somehow a bad person, because they're not. Many of them represent the people in this room. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we have more long-term expertise in the system so that we're not relying so much on the various special interest groups to determine, to have the expertise about how government works. Otherwise, we have, just frankly, a rotating musical chairs. We have people who serve as staff or have come from a particular private sector group and then, based on their district, cycle in and out. We need to start worrying more about governing and not about where our next jobs are coming from. Now, for someone like myself who's worked in the tech industry, and by the way, I'd be the only person from the tech industry in the legislature, I can find stuff afterwards, but frankly, we need to start thinking more long-term, so.
What was the question again?
Too much power. One group that has too much power in Sacramento.
I don't think there's really anyone who can claim they have too much power. What's ended up happening in our state government is, if anyone's watched FIFA soccer, European soccer, when you watch teams playing with each other, battling it out, and they all have their, on the front of their jerseys, the sponsor that's supporting them. Unfortunately, it seems like Sacramento, that's what's becoming in Sacramento, because I hear it. You know, business community says that labor has too much power. When you look at labor, there's infighting there. There's people trying to take away, you know, there's one group that doesn't want tax credits to go to another group. There's another group that doesn't want a certain funding to be dedicated to this one group. No one really can claim exact power. I believe in reforming government so that at least electeds can serve up to 14 or 12 years rather than 14. And that way you incentivize them to either be in one house or the other, but not move around, and to become experts in their arenas. Because there was a point in our state government where the chair of rules meant something. The chair of healthcare meant that you knew healthcare in and out better than most people who are in the healthcare industry. Thank you.
I think the answer is really simple. Politicians, elected officials, have an overbloated sense of power and self-importance. I think that for the most part, people that run for office have long ago forgot that this isn't about them. It's about the people. It's about who you represent. It's about what you're going to do, not what your next job is. It's not important to really worry about your job security when you're really there at the service of the people. And if you have to take on the lobbyists, and if the consequence of speaking for what you believe in, which are your constituents, is that you serve one term, so be it. You go there not to be somebody, but to do something. And I think that many people that run for office forget that. This is not a privilege. It is a hard-earned opportunity, and you have a job to do. And if people who run for office stop thinking they're so important, I think we'll get a lot more done.
Great answers. All right, now we're going to talk about jobs, job creation, and I'll start with Andrew. How do you plan to create jobs and help businesses here in California?
Well, I think this district is a perfect example of job creating potential. We have the largest general aviation airport west of Mississippi. We have a large healthcare presence, and we also have the heart of the entertainment industry with Universal, CBS, and what I call animation post-production row. I think the first thing we need to do is understand the importance of the creative sector in the California economy. According to the Otis report, 1 in 6 jobs comes from arts, entertainment, or design. You have to have that strategic plan with specific policies that will help those industries, whether it's waiving sales tax for manufacturing purposes, expanding the tax credits, or coming up with new credits for the animation industry, making sure we're including commercials like New York does, identifying what we can do for our video game industry. This creates jobs, creates a better tax base for us. And also with our healthcare system and general aviation, we're not investing enough in our education. We're going to have a shortfall of pilots coming up. Not many people talk about that. We don't have people with the technical skills to run those airports. So that's just the beginning of what we can do. You can't answer this all in 1 minute.
I know, it's tough. All right, Adrin, you're up.
Thank you. First of all, I've already helped in creating jobs when working for Assemblymember Paul Krikorian and in passing the $500 million tax credit for the first time in California's history, specifically for entertainment industry. The first $100 million actually yielded $327 million the first year, which was a $1 to $3 ratio already. So if that speaks for itself. Second of all, when I was talking before about clusters, you look along the 5 freeway, Sun Valley, Sunland, Tahunga area, a lot of vacant commercial properties sitting there empty. We can incentivize through enterprise zones, through various different programs as well that EDD has as well, in order to invest in businesses setting up, especially along the corridor, which is then going to go to the port as well. And last but not least, streamlining, making, instead of a business having to deal with 12 different agencies, to deal with 2 agencies when it comes to permitting, citing, and everything else when you're trying to go through the rigmarole of the state bureaucracy in order to be able to set up your business. Thank you.
Great.
Would you repeat the question?
Yes, creating jobs. How would you create jobs and support business in this district?
Okay. Well, I have created jobs in this district in the past year and won a statewide award for it. Went to the Canoga Park Workforce Center and got mechanics that didn't have the skills to do automotive hybrid techniques. So we took them to Pierce College. We had about $35,000. We trained 33 people as a test pilot, and we got 100% of those people full-time jobs at 15 car dealerships in our local community. That's a microcosm. At Long Beach City College, I coordinated the largest workforce training grant in the nation and had the largest job placement in the nation. And we employed techniques that allowed us to identify available jobs by zip code. It might sound very technical, but in fact, that is the way you do it. You do it one step at a time. I haven't talked about intellectual property rights yet and what's going on with our patent applications in the state of California. I hope I get a chance to do that, because if we want to solve the problems with the entertainment industry, we have to start dealing with intellectual property, patent applications, and the way in which we can keep all of that very important intellectual property and that which is American here on our borders. I hope we get a chance to talk about that.
Yes, that's up next. Brian.
Thank you. First, absolutely, we need to actually stand up and fight for our industries here, and particularly in the film tax credit. Absolutely, we need to not only increase it, we need to not only extend it, but we also need to broaden what qualifies under those tax credit programs. Number two, absolutely agree in streamlining. I talked to a woman named Kathy in Toluca Lake who lost her job at a wind farm company because the company actually left the state of California. It took too long to get through the regulatory environment to actually make sure that we could create jobs here. And those are all absolutely important. But I will also say there is no long-term solution to job creation in the state unless we make sure we are producing a world-class workforce. Public Policy Institute of California projects that we will have 1 million more jobs here in the state of California in 2025 that require a college degree than we will be producing in college graduates. So unless we are actually making sure that we are reforming our public education system, make sure every single public school is an exemplary public school, all other job creation programs will simply be band-aids.
So I want to get to measures that you guys will take to support the film production here in California. And I know you guys have all touched on that a little bit, but if you could put it within the context of the competitive landscape and the fact that we're battling with states like Texas and to try to keep the business here. So if you can kind of frame your questions within that context of competition, I would appreciate it. All right, and we'll start.
Sure. In fact, Steve, you may want to help me out with this. I don't even remember at this point.
I'm not a declared candidate.
Are you undeclared?
In 2009, summer of 2009, when we actually instituted the first year of the tax credits, I think feature filming in Los Angeles area had dropped down to only one film for that fiscal year to come. Immediately after the end of July, when the tax credits were distributed and the money was being spent, I can't remember exactly what it jumped to, but it was literally, I think, 12 or 14 feature film. It jumped from 1 to 12 or 14 feature films within just a period of a month. That tells you that the infrastructure is here. People don't want to move and go elsewhere because the hub of the talent pool is here. Once we decimate that talent pool here, it's going to be lost. It's going to take us a century to try to be able to bring back that talent pool back into this hub as well. So we need to stop the bleeding. It's not just jobs going, it's about the talent pool being lost and for us not to be able to restore that again.
Thanks, Laurette.
Well, I think that really the film credits, while we are fighting for an extension of those en masse, you know, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. What we're really dealing with here is the piracy issues that are a result of the internet and a result of taking it. When I was at Home Shopping Network, my area was intellectual property. I secured contracts that gave us the rights to certain intellectual property, be it a brand, a celebrity, something of that nature. Without that, we would not have really had the results that we did. So my idea is to go to the source of where the piracy occurs as opposed to how it's distributed. What that means is most of the piracy occurs in movie theaters still today. To introduce infrared technology that's from the defense industry that actually shuts down the movie if there is some sort of a flash that occurs while you're watching the movie. It's an innovative idea. It's got a lot of legs to it. I think it will keep the pirates confused for a while until we can figure out ways to stop the streaming online. And I think our intellectual property is sacrosanct. Our patent applications have gone down. We're behind China. We really need to start looking at what innovation really means and how we support innovation and creativity in this state.
Andrew.
Having worked in the industry and done policy, some very good ideas. I think it was a very interesting idea with the flash technology. I do intellectual property, and it's a very important federal issue that we deal with every day. But let me tell you what we can do better here in California in comparison with what's happening in other states. In New York, they give a credit for commercial production, and they have a $400 million a year credit versus the $100 million that we have here. In Texas and in Florida, they have credits, and in Canada, they give credits for the video game industry to encourage people to locate jobs in those areas. Those are the kinds of things that we frankly need to do here in California. And with the Creative Sector Plan, we can do that. I have an animation advisory task force being headed up by the former head of president of Marvel Entertainment to come up with look at what's happening in Vancouver and these other places to start adopting it. Because frankly, in this competitive environment that we're in, we're not looking at where the industry is going. and we need to look more to the future in order to be able to adapt to it and make sure the incentives create jobs here in California, not just keep the intellectual property here.
Thank you. Brian?
I worry that we're at a tipping point again here in LA. Last year, for the first time, the majority of TV pilots were filmed outside of Los Angeles County. And we can't afford to stand by idly and watch another industry go. I think with the film tax credits, we need to look at 3 different approaches. One, we need to extend it beyond the current timeline to make sure that it's renewable from year after year. 2, we need to increase the amount. Again, we only have $100 million. There are times when other states across the country come close to competing with that are much smaller than us. For a while, New Mexico, for example, was offering film tax credits that were almost on par with the volume of film tax credits being given by the state of California. And we need to broaden the types of productions that are actually able to qualify under the film tax credit program. Those 3 things, increase, extend, and broaden, are absolutely critical to keeping production and the creative economy here in LA and the 46th Assembly District.
Great. Now I know all of you in the audience have some questions that are just you've been burning to ask. So I want to open it up to the audience, and we'll go right here.
We only touched briefly on one of the largest components of our economy in the 46th district is healthcare. And last week, SB 810, which is the single-payer proposal for California, failed to pass the state Senate. It will come up again. What is the candidate's position on single-payer healthcare in California?
Very good question, and I'm gonna just cut you off. I'm gonna just say, and I don't mean to be rude, but we just need to be mindful of time. So, Adrin, let's go.
I support it. It makes sense. I think if we've been able to do this at the federal level for a certain group of individuals, we can be doing this also and absorbing the costs and also realizing a lot of efficiencies through a single payer structure.
I come from a healthcare family. My father's director of managed care at Parkland Hospital. I myself helped my father find state funding for school-based health clinics where we cut the teen pregnancy rate in half. SB 810 is a good option. It's one which is worth looking at and I generally support. But I also think that we should look at a variety of options. And while we're pushing forward with that, we can look at this exchange program we have under the Affordable Care Act and how we can pool our system to make sure that we get as much universal coverage as possible that way as well. Right.
I grew up in a single-payer system. My father was an Army officer, and that was the type of healthcare we had. We were lucky to have that. I do support transitioning over time, at the right time, and in the right way to a single-payer system, not only for increasing access, but also for the efficiencies that we can achieve. But my first priority in Sacramento on healthcare would not be single-payer, but would be to really wrap my mind around and understand the complexities around the implementing regulation on the federal healthcare reform acts and make sure that we are doing that wisely, efficiently, and appropriately.
Right, correct.
I'm against it, and the reason why is because several years ago, there was a bill, SB 1014, where the hospitals were going to provide 5% of their revenues to underwrite, if you will, single payer. Clearly, the hospitals cannot do that. Clearly, the revenues are not there to do that. I like the Patient Protection Act. I do not believe that we need single payer at this point in time. It has tax credits, it has subsidies for anyone that is 400% above the poverty line. It does provide for more affordable and accessible health care through community clinics. It's a very good program. It needs to be given its chance. Right now, we cannot afford to invest in an infrastructure in our state government that would replace private sector health insurance infrastructure at a $3 to $5 billion a year cost, and that's just the start. I like what we're going to do. I'm looking forward to working with the Patient Protection Act.
Great. Okay, one more question. We'll go back here.
Yeah, I have a question. I didn't hear, excuse me, did not hear anything about, number one, the home construction industry has always led us into recessions and led us out of recessions. We have a climate out there with a lot of foreclosure, short sales, and a housing market that is still messed up and could be messed up for years. Once that is cleaned up, we could have a new home construction industry which employs maybe 20% of our economy if you go into appliances and other things, and a great employer to our economy. How would you handle the foreclosures, the short sale situation to get us to a balanced housing market, to get new construction, once again, home new construction going?
Okay, Brian?
It's a great question, and one actually I'm gonna have to think a lot more about. I mean, I think this is definitely a key and major crisis facing not only business and job creation, but also families throughout the 46th Assembly District. I think what we need to do in figuring this out is make sure that we are balancing fairness to our families who are actually in homes whose mortgages are underwater. Make sure that we are really diving deep on issues around equitable foreclosures. Make sure that we are eliminating fraud and inefficiencies in the foreclosure system, and work to find ways to prevent this from happening in the future. And this is an area in which I would hope to partner with many business leaders in this room to get to a right answer that balances those interests.
Andrew?
Well, I used to work for homebuilder.com, realtor.com, and as a former probate referee, I've seen what the appraisals, with doing appraisals, the effect of this market, and it's hard for us to dig our way out. It is a complex problem, but I think there's a couple issues we can look at. One is we can look at what Nevada has done with regards to foreclosures, because in some cases they happen too easily and there's not enough encouragement to get them back on the market so that we can equalize. The other problem on the other side is these companies that have gone out and dug themselves into a fiduciary duty hole with these securitized loans. They can't they can't bring the houses out because then they've violated their obligations to their shareholders. So we need to find a way of working out a solution. We get everyone at the table because we don't want to end up in another, I don't want to say a bailout situation. At the same time, it's a very complex legal problem that we put ourselves into as well. And as that's the one case where actually having a lawyer up there might be a good thing because we can come up with some. And it's not often I can say that as a lawyer, but it might be a good thing to have someone who has that background to help come up with the solution in that area.
Thank you. Adrin?
Going back to what I had mentioned before about streamlining the process so that you can deal with at least 2 agencies rather than 12 agencies involved, that's one step in the process, and that's a general way of also addressing both state and local issues. 2, we need CEQA reform. Great intention behind the legislation when it came out, but it's been abused over the course of decades. So we need to cut the timeline put into CEQA without altering or having any negative impact on the environmental protections that it offers. And 3rd, just the news about Freddie Mac coming out yesterday on how it was betting against. Yeah, at this point, there's a lot of legal issues involved with this as well. So this is going to unravel itself over the course of the next year, several years to come, and there's going to be a lot of legal challenges coming up as well through that.
Laurette?
I love community banks. I think the community banks and credit unions have been underutilized in this crisis. And when we really sort of drill down to what happened here, there was always this statement that was repeated over and over again: too big to fail, too big to fail. Well, I think that any family shouldn't fail either as the result of bad credit and the mortgage crisis that we have. So for me, I would really like to start moving some of these mortgages away from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and start working with community banks. They're much more localized. You get to know these folks, and we can work on refining the lending practices there. We really don't have a construction crisis, we have a finance crisis. And what we have to do with that is to unravel some of the oversights that were not enforced in our finance system and in our banking system, at the same time creating more flexibility within our community banks and credit unions. It's a tricky tightrope, and I think we can do it. But I think that if we get to that place, it'll be a 3-year process, maybe 4, to actually streamline the regulations, enforce them a little bit more in one area, and actually find ways where we can actually go in individually and work with people on a case-by-case basis through community banks and credit unions.
All right.
I'll be the Trojan horse on this one. Anyhow, the income tax structure in California is so progressive and volatile that how would you go about correcting that without trying to lean off onto the split roll property tax, which would really help price California out of competitiveness?
Okay, I'll start with.
I'm sorry, Vic, I don't understand what your one question that can you simplify?
I'm asking about the income tax structure, to make it less volatile. I mean,
For businesses or individuals?
Both.
Alright, let's talk about business.
Focus on business, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the franchise tax fee of $800 a year for somebody, whether they make $20 or $2 million if it's an S corp, should really be abolished and have a less regressive quality to it. I like the payroll tax deductions. I like things that are going to incentivize small business owners to actually hire more people. You know, the backbone of this state is the small business owner. And in this particular district, the fastest growing small business owners are Latinas. So, you know, that opportunity is very exciting. The Small Business Development Corps is a place that I've worked and want to work with to start looking at ways in which we can extend lines of credit for the small business owner that's been in business a year or less, or has $50,000 or less. So as it relates to taxes, I think that we should take a threshold approach. That when one gets to a certain threshold, you implement a tax. But I also think it should be on net receipts, not gross receipts, because gross receipts tends to be tricky, you know. So those are just a couple of ideas.
I'm proud to be endorsed by the California Small Business Association. I'm the chair of the Business and Professions Caucus for the State Democratic Party. I think you bring up some very good points about our tax system, and the ideas about franchise taxes is one area. But frankly, those who want to just rip the Band-Aid off on Prop 13, there could be consequences of that as well. We need to look at an integrated approach, that if we are going to change that, we need to phase it in, not just right away go right to it, because it creates sort of a long-term problem for keeping our businesses in California. There's a lot more we can do for our small businesses as well, in terms of eliminating loopholes that only the largest corporations get, the smallest small businesses can't possibly take advantage of. And we have to re-examine the tax system as a whole. It used to be 40% of the taxes that we collected, and about 35% came from sales tax because we were manufacturing oriented. How do we adapt to a new information environment? We took the first step by repealing by changing for internet sales tax, and that will come in a couple of years once, you know, if they can't get it done on the federal level. But there's a lot more we can do.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, this is, 92% of our tax base comes from corporate income tax, personal income tax, or sales tax, leading to one of the greatest volatilities of any state in the country. I think this is central to any problem that we're trying to address here in the state of California. And again, I think this goes to the fact that we do need to broaden our tax base. And I think we need to do that as a portfolio approach. We can't continue to single shot this and simply say, we're only going to increase the tax rate on the highest, or the marginal tax rate on the highest income earners, or we're only going to apply this tax to this sector. We need to actually step back and say, okay, how are we going to make sure that the 21st century economy here in California is taxed appropriately, which across multiple industries at a lower tax rate?
I'll just keep it simple. Keep it predictable, consistent, and simple. I think that's what we need to work to achieve.
Great.
Hi there. What is your stance on rent control when the Assembly has a bill? Will you seek to strengthen rent control, or will you seek to unwind it and weaken it?
Agreed.
Well, there's rent control, there's different forms of rent control. There's rent stabilization, which is what we have in Los Angeles, and then there's more progressive forms in Santa Monica. I think given the protections of allowing folks with certain capabilities to pay and afford a certain level is important, and I keep it at where it is right now. I don't know, I need to look and review the specifics of the exact bill that's being offered right now to be able to better answer the question. But I think where we're at right now, we probably don't want to change from that position too much at this point.
Andrew.
I'm guessing you're talking about the Leno bill that's going through right now, or just generally?
Not a trick question,
Okay.
folks. If you strengthen or weaken it.
There's no question, as was said before, rent stabilization, rent control was meant to protect a certain class of people. I don't know that it's doing it right now. I don't think it is. And we do need to look at going back to it, making sure that it's reaching the goals. I don't think you're gonna be able to get rid of it in entirety, frankly, because there are seniors and young people who get protections. But people like myself, when I worked for Paramount and I was making 6 figures a year and living in a rent stabilized apartment, that shouldn't be happening either. So we need to get a system that reaches its goals and stops punishing property owners who do want to improve their property at the same time. I do want to go back because he brought up something about CEQA reform earlier, because it's something that I've gotten to talk a little bit about as well. I think there are certain kinds of projects which we should target, which benefit society, which we do need to look at streamlining our processes on certain kinds of development, but I don't think we should do it for all projects at all times. There are some times when you do want to make sure you have neighborhood input. We do have to figure out, so.
Thank you.
That's important to clarify.
Brian.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna have to look at this issue some more. And again, I would have to take a balanced approach to this, making sure that the parties that were intended to be protected and the groups that were intended to be protected are protected, and make sure that we're not creating an overly intensive regulatory environment for our apartment owners in particular. So I'll have to look more into that.
Well, there's $10 billion worth of blight in our city that really can't be improved because the owner of that apartment, if you will, doesn't have the ability to take a loan and make capital improvements. And the repayment of that loan is without the capacity to do anything at all to the rent that is being afforded to them. So what we have is an infrastructure for people that's getting worse and worse and worse by the day. So there's 2 different kinds of approaches, I believe, which is the apartment owner or business owner that has bought a 3-plex, 4-plex, some sort of threshold for their retirement. And this is something that they must continue to invest in order to improve it. I think that particular individual has the right to make capital improvements and have an incremental pass-through to the person that is actually renting that property. On the other hand, you look at something that's much larger than that, and I would have to really take a hard look at what we're doing with respect to a larger corporate type of approach to this. But at the end of the day, we need to do something about our buildings. We need to do something to enable our owners to recapture some of their capital investments.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. And Steve.
Last question.
Last question.
Whichever one of you is elected, from the first day, will face tremendous pressure from your caucus to do what the caucus wants you to do, from public employee unions, from Stuart Waldman and VICA. If you say something to offend Google, you may find yourself the subject of an internet blackout. You all spoke to being independent and bringing new thinking to Sacramento. So can each of you give me just one example in your professional lives where you took a stand because it was the right thing to do, even though it may have alienated, offended, or annoyed colleagues, coworkers, employers, constituents?
Great question, Steve. All right, who wants to go first?
I will.
All right.
I can name just about any year where there has been questions. I don't suffer fools easily. I don't really think that if a process doesn't make sense to me, it just doesn't. If it doesn't have a logic to it, if it doesn't have a result to it that's actionable, practical, tangible, there's nothing that can move me to beyond that threshold. I don't agree just to agree. I'm an economist by training, and I've worked in a lot of different scenarios. And those scenarios have always taken, I believe success is about challenging what's so and finding a better way to go about getting the job done. One key example are the arguments I had when I was on the board of Home Shopping Network, and no one believed that we could actually do this thing called As Seen on TV. No one believed that, but I did, and went out and convinced Kmart to do a joint venture with us, and the rest is history. I'm not afraid to take things on, and those who know me in this room probably have had their own stories that they can tell you about how all that works.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Great, thank you. I'm not an insider. And I'm running because I've spent my professional career immersed in communities, fighting for kids and for families, and I'm bringing that perspective up with me to Sacramento. This is not a political calculus for me. This is deeply personal because I think now is the time that we have to really make hard choices and fight for the future of California. I think my entire career has been one, whenever you're fighting for reform against the status quo, whether it's as a first grade teacher in a low-income school, whether it's as running a reform-minded nonprofit, whether it's running a public charter school network, you're constantly facing the fact that others are out there telling you that the status quo is not worth taking on, that the status quo is too powerful. Every single day I go to work, I have to fight those who are demanding that we keep the status quo, because our kids and our workers, our families, and our future is too important.
I've made a stand up a little. I think, frankly, I've made my career out of making things work that didn't work by thinking outside of the box. And I'll give you an example. There was a time when I lived in the Fairfax area, and I was a neighborhood council chair. And we had a nonprofit that was in the community, and we had some homeless folks who were hanging out in the alley setting fires and scaring the neighbors. The easy thing to do would have been come in and just tell them, you need to put a gate up. But they're a business, they're a nonprofit business. Instead, we worked out a compromise where, yes, they did put a gate up, but the neighbors promised not to object if they wanted to lease out the parking spaces behind the gate to pay for the gate. We need people who are willing to think outside the box a little more to come up with those solutions. I deal with, let's say unpopular stance, but outspoken stance frequently within the Democratic Party. I've done a lot of work within the Jewish community in terms of making sure that we stand up for Israel. And that doesn't always make me popular with the folks, in some wings of the party. But we have managed to bring people together and find common ground and stand our principles at the same time by making, by finding common values. And that's what I'm going to do. There are ways you can make change and stand up for your principles. It doesn't necessarily mean shouting it from the top of the nearest treetop, and you still get the same change done. And we protect the interests of the folks, your constituents.
Thanks for asking that question. It's about integrity and conviction. I just was notified that I'm not going to get an endorsement of a certain group, just this last week, by the way, because I wouldn't commit to signing a pledge. If that's one example that I can use that's immediate, I can tell you of that one. Second, given my background, given the involvement I've had with my boss's campaigns, we've always been on the receiving end of massive amounts of IE money against us. The city council race, it was just the IEs alone were 1.1 million. From some very friendly unions that we had been working with. So you can argue that there were some cases where we didn't take a stand on some of the measures or some issues that were of interest, but at the end of the day, we did what was right. I've stood my ground on which areas I'm willing to draw a certain line on, and have paid the consequences for it as well.
Thanks. I think actually that was our last question. Sorry about that. I would like to have closing statements. If you could keep your closing statements to 2 minutes each so that we can all get out and get to work, that would be great. And we'll start with Andrew. Closing statement.
Sounds
Final
good.
impression.
For my final impression, try the fish. Okay, at the beginning of this forum, I laid out that we have a choice for this new district. Do we keep doing the same thing over and over again, or do we find someone with a new approach, someone who has the direction and the experience to be able to to be on track? Now we know this district, as we said, is the heart of the entertainment industry. We've got a huge healthcare presence. We have one of the largest general aviation airports. We need someone who will be a strong legislator, who can work the system well, not someone who can merely check the box for the next 6 years. We can't afford that. So we need someone who will fight to get the Van Nuys Rapid Way in place, and for public transport, mass transit dollars to be put here in the valley. That's not something we got to talk a lot about. And who's willing to stand up for our arts and entertainment industries and understand that they're the jobs engine that they really are. Now, I'm running to be the voice for the 465,000 frustrated citizens of the 46th, from Toluca Lake to North Hills. to be a voice for the tech community, to be a voice for the Jewish community, to be a voice for business, labor, Latinos, Filipinos, and everyone who wants to bring California back to being the Golden State. Now, I'm fortunate enough to have gotten some wonderful support. I've been endorsed by Marty Cooper, who I know is who is here today, the former chair of VICA, LA City Councilman Paul Koretz, the Green advocates like John Parfrey, and Clean Tech LA's Michael Swartz has been a supporter, and State Senator Gloria Negrete McLeod. I've raised the money to be competitive. I've got the endorsements and the community supports, and I think that I fit the district best in terms of its profile, especially in light of the fact that this is a district that's 53% Democrat, and we're in the middle of the most important race going on in our district, as much as we like to think we're important, but the one that's getting all the attention is the Berman-Sherman race, which is getting a little bit testy right now, as you may have noticed. I have the ideas, I have the experience as an educator in the private sector to get things done, and our new district is a great opportunity to the Valley. And in closing, I hope you'll join me in standing up, get good leadership in Sacramento, and support Andrew Lachman for the State Assembly in 46. Thank you.
It was started, I think Steve may have alluded to it, why would anybody want to run for this job at this time? We are at a crossroads. We are at a real crossroads here in California. And that crossroads isn't between success and failure. That crossroads is between fulfilling the promise of who we are and who we can be to our current community and to future generations, or descending into mediocrity and underinvesting in the services in the future of this great community. And I think to actually make sure that we are actually fulfilling our promise and choosing the right path here, we need a different type of leader. We need someone with vision, we need someone with courage, and we need someone with conviction. Someone who's willing to get to Sacramento, to challenge the status quo, not to throw rhetorical bombs, not to fight for fighting's sake, but to challenge the status quo respectfully and while building bridges. And that is why I'm running for the Assembly, to fight for our future here in California, to fight to make sure that we are keeping 21st century jobs here in the Valley and in California, to fight to make sure that we have a common sense approach to our state's budget that's long term, to fight to make sure that we are passing along to our children a cleaner and healthier environment than the one we inherited, and to fight to make sure that we have a great public school for every single family that invests in the 21st century workforce. And I'll tell you, when I leave today, I get the great privilege to go back to a school where I will look in the faces of children who are counting on us to make sure that we put California on the right path. And I hope you will join me in this vision for what's possible for California's future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for listening to all of us today. You know, I've served in the private sector, as we've talked about, in the entertainment industry, having worked my way up by my own bootstraps, became Deputy State Controller, and authored, along with the team there, Steve Wesley, John Chung, really our green workforce training initiatives for, which has now resulted in a 9% growth. For the last 3 years, I've done something very different. I went into the community college system and worked in some of the most difficult places to work. Long Beach, South Central LA, places where I really met the eyes of the future, if you will. And what I learned was that there's tremendous opportunity and hope and belief in the people that I came in touch with. And they reinstituted belief in me. The simple thing is that I'm not here for myself. And I'm not here because this isn't about me. This is about them. This is about you. I am here to perform a service, to do a job, and to do it the best that I possibly can. Who endorsed me? Well, Bert Bachman, David Fleming, Ricky Gelb, who this room is named after, have endorsed me. But that's not what's important. It's why I'm here, and it's what I intend to do. What's important is that I'm here to perform a service to the best of my ability, to listen and to change and to make sure that this community grows in a way that is prosperous for everyone. Thank you.
Our
state is facing days that it probably has never seen before, yet every generation has had its challenges, and they've during that time thought that they're seeing days that they've never seen before. So it's important to keep things in context. We constantly talk about cuts. We know that that's not the only solution. We talk about revenues. That's going to be the easy way. We got to look at also shifting the way we think, looking at new paradigms of finding efficiencies. It's interesting when we have water meters here, but we don't have any water meters in Northern California. It's interesting when we gauge certain standards by industries by certain standards in one part of the state and yet not do the same thing in other parts of the state. So it's very important for us not to just look at whether it's cuts, whether it's revenue, but to look at the overall picture and figure out how is it that we need to also be changing the way we approach things in order to address the issues. I have a 16-month-old at home who I'm very proud of and I love dearly, and I want to be able to see that he has the same opportunities that I'm going to have, to be able to work for himself part-time at a bank as a teller and be able to go to college and get his degree as well. Because I'm not gonna make it easy for him. He's gonna have to earn it himself. But I want him to know that there's a roadmap, that there's an opportunity for him to achieve it. We need to invest in education. It's the original form of job creation. Don't steal that, Brian. We need to focus on that. And last but not least, thank you very much for all the support that I've received so far. Greg Libby, Fred Gaines, Joe Barad, Francine Ocean. There's been several of you that have supported me and have worked with me for me to be able to earn your support. Thank you very much for all of you joining us today.
That's all the time that we have today. Thank you all, the candidates. We appreciate having you. Thanks for answering the questions. Before we leave, just some other additional thank yous to our presenting sponsors, State Farm Insurance, FLC, Universal, Listening, co-sponsor UCLA Government and Community Relations, and media sponsor the Government Center Gazette and Van Nuys News Press. Before we close, I'd just like to mention a few upcoming events that may be of interest to you. February 24th is VICA's State Office Holders Dinner, and on March 14th, mark your calendars, VICA will hold an after-dark reception with LA County Supervisor Mike Antonovich at the Woodland Hills Country Club. Thanks all for attending. Have a great day.
And let's all thank Jacqueline for doing a great job. I'm not going to tell you what's going to nice to meet you. Hey, tell me your name. Hey, Bob. Thanks for coming. Yeah, good. You're good. And what group are you in? Infinite Communications. Yeah. Are you great? Yeah.
Brian, can you give me your email?
Sure, let me actually just give you my card.
Our board is going to get I want a pre-pack from your real estate pack. And then we need to get a questionnaire to you so you can fill it out so we can review it.
Oh, great.
So they just text me and ask me. On a personal note, I just wanted to say that my daughter is a teacher.
Oh, yeah?
Not quite. She's got her credentials. She just graduated with her master's. She hasn't been able to get a job yet. She's a teacher's aide.
Yeah.
But she's also trying to work in low income. She tutors on the side.
Oh, that's so great. So important.